The elevator doors opened on the 34th floor, and Joseph Franklin stepped out like a man who had already lost, except for his eyes. His jacket had a small tear near the left pocket. His bag was the kind that had seen too many bus rides and not enough victories. He was 61 years old, and his knees reminded him of that every morning. But he walked to the reception desk like the floor belonged to him, because in his mind, the reason he came here belonged to everyone. "Joseph Franklin," he told the young woman behind the desk. "I have a meeting with Mr. Hale." She looked at him the way people look at something they weren't expecting. Then she looked at her screen. Then back at him. "Have a seat," she said. He sat. "Let's go back 9 days. Because you need to understand what 9 days of a closed door feels like before you can understand what happened in that room." Day 1, Joseph wrote a letter. A real letter with a pen, on paper, because he believed that something handwritten carried more soul than an email. He addressed it to the corporate office of Hale Development Group and described, in careful and honest words, what the planned demolition of the Lammer Street residential block would do to 14 families who lived there. He used full names. He listed children. He talked about Gloria. No reply came. Day 2, he called the development office directly. He was transferred 3 times. On the 3rd transfer, he was placed on hold, and the whole music played for 40 minutes before the line simply went quiet. Day 3, he showed up in person to the development office on Meridian Avenue. A man in a gray suit told him that all concerns regarding the Lammer Street acquisition should be submitted in writing through the proper channels. Joseph pointed out that he had already submitted a letter. The man in the gray suit smiled like that was Joseph's problem. Day 4, Joseph attended the public council appearance. He signed up to speak. He was given 3 minutes. He used every second. He talked about Terrence, 29 years old, working 2 jobs, the overnight shift at a loading dock and 6 hours on Saturdays cleaning offices, just to keep his daughter in her bedroom on Lammer Street. He talked about Edmund and Celeste, the elderly Haitian couple on the ground floor who had lived in that building for 22 years and who, at 74 and 71, had nowhere else in this city they could afford to go. He talked about Gloria, 58 years old, edging towards Section 8 eligibility, 2 months away from qualifying for housing assistance, 2 months that the demolition timeline would steal from her like a thief in a suit. The council listened. They nodded. One of them wrote something down. Nothing happened. Days 5 through 8 were legal advice, more calls, a meeting with a housing advocacy group that was stretched so thin it could barely help itself, and one conversation with journalists who said the story was compelling, but that her editor wanted something with more of a hook. Day 9 was today. Joseph had lived enough life to know that systems are not built for people like the ones on Lammer Street. They are built for procedure, for timelines, for words like acquisition and redevelopment that sound clean and forward-moving like progress, when what they really mean is, someone with more money than you has decided your home is worth more empty than full of you. He had been a community leader once, formally with a title and everything, president of the Lammer Street Neighborhood Association for 11 years. He had organized block cleanups and after-school programs and one very memorable petition that actually worked back in 2009 that kept a predatory check-cashing shop from opening on the corner near the elementary school. He knew what it felt like to win. He also knew what it felt like to watch the thing you fought for slowly come apart anyway, because the systems that threaten communities are patient in a way that communities cannot always afford to be. His wife, Denise, had passed 4 years ago. Cancer. Quick and cruel. He still talked to her sometimes in the kitchen, early in the morning when the light came in sideways through the window. He told her about Gloria and Terrence and Edmund and Celeste. He told her he wasn't done yet. She would have told him to iron his jacket. He'd done his best. The office of Marcus Hale was the kind of room that was designed to make you feel small. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, like a throne overlooking a kingdom. The desk was large enough to land a small plane on. The art on the walls cost more than any of the 14 families on Lammer Street would earn in 5 years combined. Marcus Hale was 53, tall, and moved through the world with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no by anything that mattered. He had built his development company from a single inherited property into a multi-billion-dollar operation that reshaped city blocks the way a child reshapes clay. Quickly, without much thought for what the clay might have preferred. He walked in 12 minutes late, glanced at Joseph once, and sat down behind his enormous desk without extending his hand. "Mr. Franklin," he said, "I've been told you're persistent." "I've been told the same thing," Joseph said. "I take it as a compliment." Marcus almost smiled. "Almost? You have 15 minutes. I'm being generous." Joseph reached into his worn bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were names, dates, photographs, letters. 14 families. 14 real, specific, irreplaceable lives. He placed the folder on the desk and slid it forward. Marcus didn't open it. "Mr. Hale," Joseph said, "I'm not here to stop your project. I'm here to ask for 60 days. Just 60 days and real help, placement support, funding assistance, a structured transition. These people aren't obstacles. They're human beings, and they deserve more than a notice and a deadline." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He looked at Joseph the way a man looks at a weather forecast he has already decided to ignore. "Mr. Franklin," he said slowly, "do you know how many people have sat in that chair and asked me to slow down?" "I don't," Joseph said, "but I know none of them had these 14 names." Silence settled between them like something heavy. Then Marcus Hale did something Joseph hadn't expected. He smiled, wide and unhurried. The smile of a man holding all the cards, who knows it and wants you to know he knows it. "Tell you what," Marcus said, gesturing broadly at the room, at the city through the glass, at the whole architecture of power that surrounded them both. "You want to make calls? Go ahead." He laughed, a short, confident sound, like a door being shut. "Call whoever you want." Joseph looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The phone was nothing special. It was the kind of phone a 61-year-old man buys because it makes calls and sends texts and doesn't require a manual to operate. The screen had a small crack in the upper right corner from the time Joseph dropped on the bus. 3 weeks ago, Russian answer call from Gloria, who had just received her demolition notice and was crying so hard he could barely understand her. He held it now in the middle of Marcus Hale's 34th floor office, and Marcus was still smiling, leaning back in his throne of chair, arms folded, absolutely certain that whatever was about to happen would change nothing. Joseph scrolled to a name. He pressed call. He put on speaker. It rang once. It rang twice. Marcus examined his fingernails. It rang a third time, and then the voicemail picked up, a voice calm and familiar that said, "You've reached the office of Senator David Okafor. Please leave a detailed message, and we will return your call promptly. If this is regarding the Lammer Street Housing Initiative, press 1. The room went very still. Not loud still, not dramatic still. The specific kind of still that happens when something enters a space that wasn't supposed to be there. Like a name being spoken that everyone recognized but no one expected to hear out loud. In this room, today, Marcus Hale's arms came unfolded. Joseph did not look at him. He left a calm, clear message, his name, the date, the address of the building they were currently sitting in, and a simple sentence. "I'm in the meeting now. We may need that letter sooner than we thought." He ended the call. He set the phone face up on the edge of the enormous desk. Then he looked at Marcus Hale for the first time since dialing. "Senator Okafor," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. It was a man quietly rearranging something in his head. "David and I went to the same church for 12 years. Joseph said simply, he baptized my daughter. I was in the hospital when his mother passed. We don't talk as much as we used to, but he picks up when it matters." Here is what Marcus Hale did not know, could not have known about Joseph Franklin. Joseph had never used that connection. Not once. Not in 11 years of community leadership. Not during the check cashing petition. Not even when the city tried to reroute a bus line that would have cut Lammer Street off from the nearest grocery store. He had always believed with a stubbornness that some people found maddening and others found quietly inspiring, that the right way to fight was through legitimate channels. Letters, meetings, showing up, telling the truth loudly enough and long enough that someone with power eventually got tired of ignoring it. 9 days had taught him that sometimes the legitimate channels are designed to exhaust you, to make you spend your energy on procedure until you have nothing left for the fight itself. So today, for the first time, Joseph Franklin had used the one card he had kept in his pocket for years. Not as a threat, not as a weapon, but as proof. Proof that he was not alone. Proof that the names on Lammer Street had reached further than a 34th floor office might prefer. His mind drifted, the way minds do in moments of high tension, to the faces behind the folder on the desk. Gloria first. Gloria Washington, 58, who had lived on Lammer Street for 19 years and who baked sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving and left portions outside the doors of her neighbors without knocking, because she didn't want anyone to feel like receiving help was something to be embarrassed about. Gloria, who was 2 months away from Section 8 eligibility, 2 months, and who had told Joseph, sitting at her kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, "I'm not scared for me, Joseph. I'm scared I'll end up somewhere my grandkids can't find me." Then Terrence Mobley, 29, who worked the overnight loading dock shift from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, slept 4 hours, picked up his daughter Maya from school, then cleaned offices for 6 hours on Saturday to cover the gap. He had shown Joseph a drawing Maya made, a crayon house with a yellow door and flowers in the window. "She drew our apartment," Terrence had said, with a pride so fierce it was almost painful to look at. "She's never lived anywhere else. This is home to her. This is what home looks like in her head." Then Edmund and Celeste Beaumont, 74 and 71, who had come from Port-au-Prince in 1987 with 2 suitcases and a determination so large it had outlasted several decades of difficulty. Edmund had a garden on the small concrete patch behind the building. Tomatoes, peppers, a stubborn little lemon tree that somehow survived northern winters, because Edmund refused to accept that it couldn't. Celeste crocheted. The hallway outside their apartment always smelled faintly of whatever she was cooking, and 3 different neighbors had told Joseph that smell was the reason Lammer Street felt like a home rather than just a building. These were not tenants. These were not cases. These were not line items in an acquisition plan. They were people, specific, irreplaceable, fully alive people, and Joseph Franklin knew every single one of them by name, by story, by the particular shape of their dignity. Marcus had not spoken since the voicemail. He was sitting forward now, elbows on the desk, looking at the folder he still hadn't opened. Something in his posture had shifted, barely, but Joseph noticed. He had spent 61 years learning to read rooms. "The senator is involved in a housing initiative," Marcus said carefully. "That's public knowledge." "It is," Joseph agreed, "and the Lammer Street situation is specifically on his radar, has been for 3 weeks. Since I first wrote to him." He paused. "I didn't call him first, Mr. Hale. I called your office first, then your development team, then the city council. I came to you first, every time. I want you to know that." Something crossed Marcus Hale's face. It was quick, and he controlled it quickly, the way powerful men learn to control their expressions. But it was there, a flicker of something that might, in a different man, have been called discomfort. "You could have gone to the media," Marcus said. "I could have. You could have gone to Okafor first, gotten ahead of this weeks ago. I could have done that too. Why didn't you?" Joseph looked at him steadily. "Because I wanted to give you the chance to be the kind of man who does the right thing without being forced to. I still want that. That's why I'm here." The silence this time was different, less like a closed door and more like an open window. Marcus reached out slowly and opened the folder. He looked at the first page. Gloria Washington. Photograph. Story. Current status. 2 months from eligibility. He turned the page. Terrence Mobley. Maya's crayon drawing was photocopied on the back. He turned the page again. Edmund and Celeste Beaumont. A photograph of Edmund's garden. The lemon tree. He went through all 14. He didn't rush. Joseph didn't speak. When Marcus closed the folder, he didn't slide it back. He left it in front of him, his hand resting on top of it, like it was something he was responsible for now. 60 days, he said. 60 days, Joseph confirmed. And real support, not a hotline number. Actual placement assistance. Funding for transition costs. Someone from your team who knows the 14 names and is accountable for what happens to each one. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, very quietly, almost himself, he said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know, Joseph said. I've never... He stopped, started again. No one has ever come in here and done it like this. Like what? Marcus looked up. Like they actually believed I could be better. For a moment, neither man spoke. The city stretched out behind the glass like it always had. Indifferent, enormous, full of its own noise and movement and business. Cranes on distant buildings. Traffic 34 floors below. The ordinary machinery of a city that did not know or care that something small and significant was happening in this room. Marcus Hale was looking at his own hand, still resting on the folder, like he was noticing it for the first time. Like he was trying to figure out what kind of hand it was, the kind that builds things, or the kind that buries them. Joseph waited. He had learned, over 61 years and 9 hard days, that silence could be its own kind of pressure, not threatening, not aggressive, just present, honest silence, the kind that asks a question without words. Who are you going to be right now, in this moment, when no one is forcing you? My father lost his business, Marcus said suddenly. Joseph didn't respond. He just listened. I was 11. He had a hardware store. Small place. 2 employees, nothing fancy. A development company bought the block, and he got a notice in 30 days. Marcus paused. He never recovered. Not financially. Not. He tapped his chest once, lightly. Not in here. The room absorbed that. I told myself I'd be the one who did the buying, Marcus continued. Never the one getting the notice. I built everything around that. 30 years. Billions of dollars. And somewhere in there I stopped thinking about the notices I was sending. They became... He searched for the word. Administrative. They were never administrative, Joseph said gently. They were always people. Marcus looked at him. Something in his face was different now. Not broken, not collapsed, but cracked open just enough to let something real breathe through. Powerful men rarely crack. When they do, it is more valuable than when they shatter, because cracking means they are still standing, still capable of choosing differently. I owe you an apology, Marcus said. You owe 14 families 60 days, Joseph replied. The apology is a good start. The 60 days is what matters. And for the first time since Joseph Franklin had walked into this office, Marcus Hale laughed. Not the laugh from earlier, the wide and dismissive laugh of a man certain of his power. This was smaller, quieter. The laugh of a man catching a glimpse of himself in an unexpected mirror and finding the reflection both uncomfortable and clarifying. 60 days, Marcus said, and I'll assign a team. Real people, not a hotline. I want names, all 14, and I want weekly status reports sent to me directly, not filtered through legal. I'll provide everything you need, Joseph said. And the senator, I'll let him know how this conversation went. Joseph almost smiled. He'll be glad to hear it. Marcus nodded slowly. He picked up his own phone and dialed his assistant. Get me Richards from Community Relations and our transition funding coordinator. Today, before 5. He paused. And cancel my 4 o'clock. He set the phone down and looked at Joseph across the vast desk that suddenly seemed less like a barrier and more like just a piece of furniture. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Go ahead. Why does it matter this much to you? You don't live on Lammer Street. You don't have to be here. You spent 9 days on this. Why? Joseph considered the question, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wanted to give it the words it deserved. My wife used to say that a community is just people who have decided to matter to each other, he said. Denise, she passed 4 years ago. He looked out at the city for a moment. She would have known every single person in that folder by name before the first week. She would have had them all over for dinner. He paused. I can't be her, but I can do this. I can show up. I can make sure the people on Lammer Street know that somebody sees them, that they're not invisible just because the system is trying to look through them. Marcus was quiet for a long time after that. She sounded like she was remarkable, He said finally, "She was the best person I ever knew." Joseph said simply. Joseph Franklin left the building at 20 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and stood still for a moment, letting the city rush around him. People with coffee cups and earbuds, a delivery cyclist weaving through traffic, a woman on the corner selling flowers from a folding table. Ordinary Tuesday life, moving at its ordinary Tuesday pace, unbothered and unaware that anything had shifted, but something had. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed Gloria first. She picked up on the second ring. "Joseph? What happened? How did it go?" 60 days, he said. Real support. A dedicated team. Transition funding. The sound she made was not quite a word. It was something underneath words. Relief finding its way out of body that had been holding too much fear for too long. He heard her sit down heavily in her kitchen chair. He heard her breathe. "Joseph," she whispered. "Joseph, how did you—" "You don't need to know how," he said warmly. "You just need to know it's done. For now. We still have work ahead. But you have time, Gloria. You have your 60 days. She cried. He let her. He didn't rush it. Then he called Terrence. Terrence said nothing for 5 full seconds and then said very quietly, "Maya's going to keep her yellow door." Joseph had to turn away from the pedestrian traffic for a moment after that one. He sent Edmund and Celeste a text because they preferred texts their granddaughter had taught them, and they were proud of their proficiency. He wrote, "Good news. Call me when you're free. The garden is safe for now." 3 minutes later, Edmund called anyway, and Joseph could hear Celeste in the background asking rapid questions in Creole that Edmund translated between sentences. By the end of the call, Celeste had got on the phone herself and spoken to Joseph in a mixture of French and English and pure feeling, and Joseph understood every word. The walk back toward Lammer Street took 40 minutes. Joseph didn't take the bus. He needed the air. He needed to feel the distance between the 34th floor and the ground, to walk it step by step, to let his body understand what his mind was still processing. He thought about Marcus Hale's face when the voicemail played, the way the laughter had died, not in anger, not in defeat, but in recognition. The sudden, uncomfortable recognition of a man who had been so certain he knew how the story ended that he hadn't considered the possibility of a different author. He thought about what Marcus had said. No one has ever come in here and done it like this. Like they actually believed that could be better. That was the thing people in power forgot. Joseph thought. Or maybe they never learned it. They forgot that belief was its own kind of force. That walking into a room and genuinely, stubbornly believing that the person across from you was capable of more than they were currently doing. That was not naivety. That was not weakness. That was one of the most dangerous things an ordinary person could bring into an extraordinary room, because it didn't attack the system. It invited the system to outgrow itself. And sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes it worked. Lammer Street looked the same as it always did. Mrs. Patterson was on her stoop with her small radio. The kids from the 3rd floor were drawing something on the sidewalk with chalk. Edmund's lemon tree was visible through the iron fence. Small and stubborn and green, absolutely unconvinced by northern winters. Joseph stopped at the corner and looked at all of it. He thought about Denise. He thought about the 9 days. He thought about the torn jacket he probably should have sewn up before the meeting and hadn't. And how it hadn't mattered, because what he carried into that room wasn't clothes. It was truth. It was names. It was 14 specific and irreplaceable lives, and the stubborn old-fashioned belief that dignity deserved to be fought for even when the fight was exhausting, even when the channels were closed, even when a man in a 34th floor office laughed at you and told you to call whoever you wanted. You call. That's what you do. You show up and you tell the truth, and you refuse to let the system convince you that the people you love are invisible, and sometimes, in the spaces between procedure and power and profit, something human find a way through. 60 days. It wasn't a victory forever. It was a door open just wide enough for 14 families to breathe, to plan, to find their footing. There was still work ahead, placement and paperwork and follow-up and accountability. Joseph knew that better than anyone. A promise made on the 34th floor still had to survive contact with lawyers and timelines and the ordinary friction of institutions doing what institutions do. But the promise was made. And Joseph Franklin was very good at holding people to their promises. He walked down Lammer Street, nodding to Mrs. Patterson, stepping around the chalk drawings, breathing in the smell of whatever Celeste was already cooking in celebration. The city moved on around him, enormous and indifferent as always. But on this one street, on this one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, 14 families had a little more time, a little more dignity, a little more proof that showing up stubbornly, honestly, and with the right names in the right folder could still change something. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. If this story moved you, if you saw someone you know in Gloria, in Terrence, in Edmund and Celeste, if Joseph's quiet, relentless refusal to give up reminded you that ordinary people can walk into extraordinary rooms and change what happens inside them, then share this story with someone who needs to hear it today, like it so others can find it. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. Because stories like this one, stories of dignity refusing to be dismissed, are exactly the ones worth telling and worth passing on.